I am showing off my Indianapolis Motor Speedway hat for the benefit of those who are watching on YouTube. What a Benny. What a Benny you've just been provided. Here is the Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Is the nomination of Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York City a winning model for Democrats nationwide? First, let me thank my friends at Parks Casino. Looks like the heat wave is over in the Northeast. It is still a great time, especially with the weekend on the horizon, to get inside and do so at Parks Casino. And while you're there, perhaps you will enjoy some live entertainment at Parks Casino's Excite Center, because that's where all the headliners go. Gary Clark Jr. on July the 3rd. Can you believe July 4th weekend is like a week away? UB40 is coming, the Australian Pink Floyd show. Wish you were here, 50th anniversary. Love it. The Revivalists, roots rock with a modern twist. The tour is called All in the Family, 10 Years of Men Amongst Mountains. Isn't that intriguing? Classic rockers, Kansas, the Psychedelic Furs, and guest Gary Newman in October. Also Everclear, Sparkle and Fade, 30th anniversary tour. Almost Queen, a tribute act to Queen, obviously. And Bill Murray and his Blood Brothers for just one night only at Parks Casino. That's on November 15, Saturday, November 15. All the tickets are available at Parks Casino, PARXCasino.com. You've got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, let's rock and roll on this Thursday. First, with yesterday's poll result, we had 35,185 votes cast on this question. Will we ever know the true impact of the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? 62.95% said no, we will not, and 37.05% said yes, we will. The debate continues today. I don't think we're any closer at this time today than we were at this time yesterday to knowing exactly what the extent of the damage that was done to the 3 nuclear facilities may have been. The only thing that I feel certain about, the only thing that I feel confident is saying, is that President Trump overstated the win, got ahead of the intel, and now is doubling and quadrupling down, showing, no sign of backing off. If he'd simply come out and said on Saturday night, flanked by Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, and Pete Hegseth, if he'd simply said, hey, the military was amazing, we achieved our objective, we need to wait and see exactly what the intel picture will be, but by all accounts, it was a really miraculous military operation, I think he'd have been in much better shape than he finds himself today. And now I suspect he's probably bringing pressure to bear on other of the intel agencies so that they don't repeat the preliminary conclusion of the Defense Intel Agency, which is the Pentagon's intel arm, because it puts him in an adversarial position to those assessments. I also have to say, I thought that Jake Tapper, I was watching in real time yesterday, and I thought that Jake Tapper had a pretty effective rebuttal to President Trump, who's now trying to make this all about the media and somehow disparaging the military, which is not the case. I mean, what's the media supposed to do? Turn a blind eye? I'm not for leaking. But when the media now has possession of this intelligence assessment and it doesn't align with what the president is saying, of course they've got to publish it. And it's not just, CNN that is doing so. In any event, here is the Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. And it couldn't be more on the news. And I just love the subject matter. Is the nomination of Zohran Mamdani, get used to saying that name, Zohran Mamdani. Maybe you'll be saying Mayor Mamdani come the fall in New York. Is this a winning model for Democrats nationwide? How interesting do I find the New York City mayoral race? So interesting that the New York Post has hooked me for the last 3 days running during my, my morning visit to Wawa. On election day, say it ain't Zoe, said the New York Post. The Post says New Yorkers must reject radical anti-Semitic socialist in today's primary. Followed by yesterday, the Wednesday New York Post. Yes, I was a sucker for this one too. Headline, NYC SOS, Who will save the city after radical socialist batters Cuomo in Democratic mayoral primary? Followed by this morning's New York Post, 3 days in a row, the Thursday Post, Scamdani. Scamdani, they say. Mayor Adams rips snake oil salesman Zohran as campaign kicks off. Did I not say yesterday that the happiest person in the Big Apple is Eric Adams, who thinks that now he may live to fight another day? What is the lesson to be learned here? Is it a model for Democrats? I say it's a model for Democrats and it's a model for Republicans, and I shall explain. And I get that the question is subject to interpretation, but let me tell you how I meant the poll question, because Axios coverage today frames nicely exactly what I had in mind. From Axios, many Democratic leaders and donors are panicking about Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old Democratic socialist who won the party's nomination to be the next mayor of New York City. This is Alex Thompson doing the writing. Alex Thompson, you'll remember, I just referenced Jake Tapper. He was Jake's co-author on Original Sin. Establishment Democrats looking to recover from 2024's losses fear that Mamdani could hurt the party's brand nationally. Young progressives believe his formula could spread beyond New York. Most Democratic leaders had backed former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the mayoral primary. Mamdani's shocking victory Tuesday, the latest example of the party's establishment being disconnected from many of its own voters. And then there's a quote from a Democratic strategist. This was very much Pickett's charge of what's left of the old establishment. This a reference to the failed effort by the Confederates at the Battle of Gettysburg. It was the same result. Many Democratic lawmakers and officials either denounced Mamdani or notably declined to rally around him yesterday, the day after his victory. Republicans, and by the way, I also said yesterday, and I feel secure in this assessment, I said that Eric Adams was the happiest person alive in the Big Apple and that Donald Trump was elated. Because Trump needs, come on, the badgering of Biden, I got to believe, is wearing thin even among MAGA members. This is a perfect new foil for Donald Trump. Axios. Republicans, including President Trump, crowed about Democrats embracing a Democratic socialist who has called for reduced police funding and sided with Palestinians in the Gaza war. Absolutely. This is better served up than Gavin Newsom for their purposes. The top two Democratic leaders in Congress, Senator Chuck Schumer and Representative Hakeem Jeffries, both New Yorkers, declined to endorse Mamdani, even as they applauded his victory. And major Democratic voters who poured tens of millions into a super PAC for Cuomo were having private discussions about whether to back an independent run by Cuomo, because there's a ballot line reserved for him in the fall, or rally behind unpopular incumbent Mayor Eric Adams, who is also running as an independent. This perhaps gives new life to Adams. If they all stay in the race, all it's going to do is fraction up that vote, and Mamdani will be elected. He'll probably be elected. Anyway. This is getting so much attention and so much coverage in a busy news cycle, mind you, with a hell of a lot still going on relative to Iran and Ukraine and the big, beautiful bill and the Supreme Court today coming forth with their final decisions of the term. And still, this New York City race is getting huge attention, so much so that Mamdani is getting the treatment of, for example, NPR. What are the 4 things to know about him? By the way, the 4 things to know about him: he would be a history-making mayor. If elected, he would be New York City's first Muslim mayor. He would also be its youngest in more than a century. He turns 34 in October. Thing number 2 to know about him: he was first elected to the New York Assembly in 2020, so young and a newcomer. Number 3, he was endorsed by high-profile progressives. Think AOC, think Bernie Sanders. And number 4, his views on Israel have been divisive. He co-founded his college's first Students for Justice in Palestine chapter. He's been a vocal critic of Israel's military response to the Hamas attacks, an issue that has deeply divided the Democratic Party. And you may also have heard this because it's getting a lot of attention, that he stirred controversy a week before the primary when in an interview with The Bulwark, he refused to condemn the phrase globalize the intifada. When asked if the slogan made him uncomfortable, Mamdani said it captured a desperate desire for equality and equal rights in standing up for Palestinian human rights. After his comment was condemned by the U.S. Holocaust Museum and other Jewish leaders, he told reporters, "It pains me to be called an anti-Semite. I've said at every opportunity that there is no room for anti-Semitism in this city, in this country. I've said that because that is something I personally believe." Okay, so is this good news or bad news nationally for Democrats? Here are some pluses and minuses that I see. On the plus side, you've got energized young voters who came out for a candidate who scored a major upset over the establishment. And in so doing, it energized a group of people that Democrats have not been able to reach recently in national elections. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you stop and think that Andrew Cuomo had the backing of former President Bill Clinton, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg. He took down a dynastic name. He himself was unknown beyond his assembly district just a couple of months ago. He won as a Muslim, as I referenced, and with a record that was portrayed as divisive in a city where folks who are Jewish hold significant political clout. That's big. And he did it with an amazing command of social media. That chicken over rice at a halal stand, chicken over rice ought to be $8 and instead it's 10, was politically brilliant. We played it yesterday on radio, but you really have to watch it to appreciate the presentation and the comfort that he exhibited in doing those sort of man on the street interviews. I think authenticity from 90 miles away, that's the distance between Philadelphia and New York City. I think that authenticity was in his favor. I think that the guy came across as someone that you believed you were getting the real him and not the fake him from. We spoke recently of Democrats needing some sizzle, some celebrity, some star power to combat what Donald Trump brings to the table. And he has all those things and represents perhaps an opportunity to move on from the party of Obama and the party of Biden. Do you remember Mark Leibovich was here? Mark Leibovich, pardon me, was here recently having written a piece for The Atlantic talking about whether Obama needs to get off the sidelines. And I took phone calls and people said, enough of these vestiges of the past. We need new names. What's the downside? What's the problem? The brand becomes or reinforces the face of Democrats. It's now Mamdani, it's the squad, it's AOC, it's Bernie. Can you sell that nationally? Can you sell that outside the 5 boroughs of New York City? I mean, after all, wasn't the lesson of 2024 supposedly that Dems were too woke, too DEI, too BLM? So if that was the lesson, as to why Harris lost, then how do you explain this guy and the interest in him nationally? Also, wasn't one of the lessons of 2024 that you need to win back working class whites? Can you do that with this message? Is this the way to go nationally? Or does it work only in some corners of the country? Among the very interesting takes that I have read from the left and the right, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, headline, People's Republic of New York City. Mr. Mamdani's main theme is affordability, and it resonated in a city that is increasingly unaffordable for the middle class. The irony is that the affordability crisis is the result of failed democratic governance. Rent control and eviction limits have caused landlords to take tens of thousands of apartments off the market. A higher minimum wage raised the cost of food and other basics, while rich union contracts keep transportation inefficient and costly. Climate bans and mandates have raised energy costs. Mamdani's solution is more socialism. He wants even higher taxes on already overtaxed businesses and high earners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And more to the point of my poll question today, the Journal says Mr. Mamdani declared himself on election night to be a model for the Democratic Party. And among the party base, he may be. He echoes all of the left-wing social policies that hurt the party in 2024. And on Israel, he sounds like Columbia University demonstrators. It's hard to believe the most Jewish city in America could elect a mayor who favors a boycott of Israel, but that is today's Democratic Party. The populist left poses obvious problems for national Democrats who want to move the party back toward the middle, but Republicans would be wise not to gloat. If Trumponomics fails to deliver strong growth and gains in real incomes, the left-wing populists will be waiting as the main alternative. That's the Wall Street Journal. That is the Wall Street Journal. Okay, two other takes that are worthy, three other takes that I want to just give you briefly. I want to hit you with Nate Silver, Mark Halpern, and Michael Smerconish. Nate Silver on this whole issue of the death of the Democratic establishment. He says, Cuomo's campaign produced a laundry list of endorsements, such as Bloomberg, former President Clinton, former Majority Whip Jim Clyburn, plus lots and lots of unions. Meanwhile, the New York Times, which can be incredibly influential in the city, issued a half-hearted anti-Zohran endorsement after initially swearing off involvement in local races. Right, remember that? The Clintons, Clyburns, the New York Times, and the unions, plus black groups, Jewish groups, Italian groups, and every other stripe of the rainbow, that was supposed to be a winning formula in New York, but the old formula doesn't compute anymore. It's hard not to be reminded of the past three Democratic presidential races, and particularly the Democratic establishment forcing an eat your spinach choice down the throats of the primary electorate. And then Nate Silver says this: Cuomo, like Clinton, was from a political dynasty that most people under the age of 40 have little or no affection for. And although Bernie is an exception, maybe it isn't that complicated. If you want to inspire younger voters, nominate younger candidates. Mamdani is 33, literally half of Cuomo's age. The former governor is 67. The extent to which this might be a leading indicator for national politics, and particularly 2028, is an open question. But I think you could go too far in dismissing it, and some fellow center-left types probably will. New York City is a weird place, but it's also an exceptionally diverse place, home to every imaginable ethnic group, more conservatives in the Democratic primary electorate than you might think, and plenty of voters who were probably closer to Cuomo on the issues, but who just didn't like his vibe or who liked Mamdani's. That's Nate Silver. And Mark Halpern, who's my guest, of course, every Wednesday in the second hour of the program, has a brilliant newsletter today in making a comparison between Trump and Mamdani. And Mark begins by saying they couldn't be more different, or so one might think at first glance. And then after analyzing each of them, says, you know what, there's a lot that they have in common, including both won by harnessing movements, Trump and Mamdani, by harnessing movements bubbling up and then exploding like volcanoes against the status quo and for the forgotten women and men of the working class. And both saw opportunity in using moneyed dynasties as their foils. It would be cheap to lump them together as mere populists, but there is a shared talent for identifying what used to be called kitchen table issues. Right, the halal stand. He also says both men possess a postmodern flair. They wink at the camera. They know they are in a show, and they invite you to know it too. Further along, Mark Halpern. He, Mamdani, like Trump, knows that message discipline is the 21st century means being the message yourself, loving on social media and in real time in synchronistic tandem. Mark Halpern, what unites them most of all, perhaps, is their command of narrative. In a world of fragmented attention and memeified discourse, both men understand that a political figure must also be a character. Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump are mirror images of both substance and form, both postmodern performers, both political storytellers, both underestimated until it was too late for a flummoxed establishment. What can I possibly add to all of that? Only this, that watching over the years on a local, state, and national level, I have seen any number of election surprises. They come in primaries because, by definition, by the time somebody goes to a general election, they're no longer an unknown. Candidates who've been counted out before the first ballot was cast who break through, often because they're young, often because they are unique, always because they are fearless, and always because they hustle. They hustle and they say something and they can communicate in a way that taps into the electorate. I mean, I referenced AOC. AOC in 2018 is exactly what I'm talking about. She ran against Joe Crowley. I think he was a 10-term incumbent. Nobody expected a 28-year-old bartender to upend Crowley, and yet she did it. Anybody remember Eric Cantor? I've been thinking about other examples where somebody that you thought wouldn't have any problem was defeated. Eric Cantor was one of the young guns. He was a House Majority Leader, I think, at the time, and in the 2014 cycle gets upended by Dave Bratt. Anybody remember Paul Wellstone? Remember Wellstone's bus? Remember Rudy Boschwitz in Minnesota was expected to be invincible, and Wellstone upset him. Too old for I'm sure us to remember, but part of the lure, there was a 29-year-old. Was he 28? 29 because he would have been 30, I guess, when sworn in, right? Yeah. How about the 29-year-old who ran in the state of Delaware and upended Republican Senator Caleb Boggs, who was believed to be not at any risk of election defeat, and a little-known county councilman by the name of Joseph Robinette, do I have that right? Yeah, I think I do. Biden upended him. One last recollection. I'm sorry if I'm long-winded in this, but I love this subject and I have a lot of thoughts on it. The final thing that popped into my head is that there's a Philadelphia ad man. I'll give Elliot Curson the props of saying a legendary Philadelphia ad man. Elliot Curson, I have to tell this quick story. I referenced him recently because in the course of the campaign, the campaign between Harris and Biden, Elliot learns, he lives in the Rittenhouse Square area of Philadelphia, and he learns that Kamala Harris is staying at the Warwick Hotel. And Elliot goes and he tapes, you remember this, TC? He tapes a sign to the brick wall across from the Warwick Hotel, something like "speak in simple sentences." And it was like brilliant. It got all this attention. People like, who posted this sign? It was Elliot Curson. It'll come to me what the sign said. Well, back in the day, in 1969, Arlen Specter was running for Philadelphia District Attorney, and a guy named Tom Gola was running for controller. Gola had been, I'm trying to get his school straight. It was LaSalle. He had been a basketball standout. So Specter and Gola running as Republicans in Philadelphia, a very uphill battle. And Elliot Curson was their ad person. And he came up with a slogan at the time. And the slogan was brilliant then, and it's brilliant now. They're younger, they're tougher, and nobody owns them. They're younger, they're tougher, and nobody owns them. They're younger, they're tougher, and nobody owns them. And that was the winning message in 1969 for Specter and Gola. And similarly, what would have been this message. Thank you, TC. Kamala, shorter answers, get to the point. Shorter answers, get to the point. Right. That was Elliot. That was Elliot then. And Elliot back in the day said they're younger, they're tougher, and nobody owns them. This sort of thing happens. And when you get a young, articulate, hustling candidate and somebody else who's getting, politically speaking, a little long in the tooth, stuff happens. That's the lesson, and it applies to R's and D's, according to me. Thursday poll question at Smerconish.com. Go vote. Is the nomination of Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York City a winning model for Democrats nationwide? Yeah, I meant it in an ideological sense, but there are lessons to be learned here for both sides of the aisle. Thank you, gang. That was long, I know, but I had a lot I wanted to get off my chest. Like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe, and please set yourself up for notifications. See ya.